as a kid, I've always been a Penn State fan, but I remember when you played. I remember when Tyler Smith played, who we had on here before, uh, one of your friends, and I remember that run in the NCAA tournament. I was like 8 or 9 years old when that happened.
Oh wow, wow.
Um, so yeah, just I remember I used to I told Tyler this too when I worked for his cryotherapy business. I couldn't afford a jersey, but I used to get a white T-shirt. I put a number 3 on it for your
That's
jersey
awesome.
because
That's awesome. That's what it's all about. That's what I always I tell my own kids that you have a son that's 18 now. I'm always like, if you can help young guys capture the imagination and enjoy the game of basketball and use your imagination in the driveway, that to me is the greatest of compliments for sure.
yeah, Joe, you were really exciting to watch, and that team overall was really exciting to watch. So as a fan as a fan of Penn State, thank you for what you did at Penn State. You to this day, you guys are the furthest team to make it in March Madness. So
Yeah, we're trying now that I'm back with Coach Rhodes, we're trying to make that a little more normal. I always say I try to make myself a little bit less of a legend because we want more Sweet 16 appearances or Elite Eights or Final Fours. But you know what? This is a place that I love. People always ask me like, what were your favorite places to play? And I always say Pittman and Penn State, right? Like I played at Pittman High School. It was a small community. I knew a ton of people in the gym. It was a longevity thing, right? Like you're prepping to play high school basketball and trying to win a state championship in this little small stage for your community. And then that was the same thing here. I always felt like the gifts, the work you put in, the gifts you have are for other people, right? And I think when you have that mentality, I had that overseas, and I always felt like I was able to connect with people even though you don't speak the language or whatever, is like they know when you're playing for them. Like when you're doing it, it's not just about you or a paycheck or whatever. You're playing for the community, right? And you're giving your all for the community. And certainly, I had my way of playing. I like to say I ignored all the experts. So people at the time didn't. Nowadays, it would be cool to be Joe Crispin. Back then I was cool to the young guys, maybe like yourself, but I was crazy to most of the old heads and maybe the coaches in the audience with the way I played. I used to always joke that when I'd go overseas, people were like, "I love the way you play." I'm like, "Well, I'm glad you love it because my coach probably doesn't always love it." But that was the way I played. I tried to play with my gut and go for it and be aggressive and failed plenty, succeeded just enough. And that's the way I look at the game of basketball, right? It's a game of soul. It's a game of the gut. It's a game of, man, let's make this thing fun. Let's get up and down. Let's hoop. Let's ball. Let's play. So did that for a long time as a player, and now I get to try to do that and help others do that as a coach.
yeah, so speaking of well, Joe, I know you're a coach now at Penn State, and it's great to have you back. And my just short story, my father went to Penn State. He worked at Paterno Library for 35 years. He just retired, and
Wow.
huge Penn State fan. His senior year was when they won the national title, so he obviously remembers you too.
I
So
probably saw him in the library one or two times.
you probably did. You probably did. Yeah, he moved around quite a bit because they used to be down where the Knowledge Commons is now, and then he was fifth floor Paterno. So he was all over the place. But what I talk about fans like that, and with football, we were always used to success and always having a winning season and postseason play and national titles. So for these diehard Penn State football fans to be excited about a basketball team, that was you guys. So what was your what was it like playing for Penn State? Like, why did you go to Penn State?
Well, it's funny. The I had a vision for playing at Penn State for quite a time. My story is really odd. I mean, I knew Danny Earl because he was a South Jersey guy. So really I mean, we followed Penn State football. I would root for Penn State football, but it wasn't like we were Penn State people there in South Jersey. I had never been up there, but I remember watching a game. This is true about Rec Hall. I shared this story about Rec Hall when we played there this year. I was watching a game my sophomore year. We were at Dickinson College doing like a visit practice because one of our coach's sons played there, and there was a game on at Rec Hall, and I forget the game, but it was a great environment, and I remember watching it in the rec center, going, "I want to play there." And that was the first Genesis, and it kind of came out of nowhere, and then it just faded. It wasn't like I kept thinking about it. I was just focused on getting better, and my there was some my senior year. I kind of ignored recruiting. I just was like, we're just gonna win, and that's all I cared about. And there was a couple teams that were like mid majors and Atlantic 10 that were interested, and took a couple visits. And then I took a visit after my senior year, and I didn't know that Bob Hurley Senior had seen the last game John and I played in the Tournament of Champions. He'd seen a half of it, and he had called Coach Dunn the next day because Coach was recruiting their point guard and said, listen, this kid's the best point guard in the state. You should recruit him. And I didn't know that, but I had just gone on a visit to William and Mary. Loved the coaching staff, but didn't think the players were serious enough about hoops for me. Came back, and this is before cell phones or anything else. My mom picked me up from the airport, and she said, "Guess who called?" And there might have been some rumblings that Penn State was going to call, but she said, "Guess who called?" And I said, "Penn State." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "Yeah, that's where I'm going."
Wow.
Sure enough, within 2 weeks, I took a an unofficial, walked across campus, ate a double cheeseburger at McDonald's, looked at the Jordan Center, and said, "Yep, I'm in." That was it. It was like, this is where I belong. This is home for me. And I was the last scholarship. And people would have said, I mean, my own dad was like, "I don't know if you can play here." He was a high school coach. He was hilarious. And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, of course I'm going to play here. I'm going to light this place up." That was the way I thought at age, I think I was only 17 at the time. And I just knew like this is the place. And I think part of the attraction was like they were okay at the time. They had a down year that year before, but the year before that they were good. It's the Big Ten. It's a new thing. They weren't that good, right? We weren't that good.
Yeah.
I like, right? When we talk about like program kind of people, there's some guys who don't want to pour concrete, right? They don't want to
Yeah.
build the foundation or even the beginnings of the first floor, framing out the walls and those kind of things. There are people who want to renovate houses. There's people who want to build houses. There's people who want to just live in a nice house, right? That's what I said. And I'm one of those guys that doesn't matter what house I move into, I'm going to renovate it and redo it. And I'm a foundation guy. Like I want to make something great, right? Put an imprint on it. So I think I was attracted to that precisely for the reason that we didn't have a ton of banners in the rafters. And I was like, no, I want to get something going here, right? And when I got done, I people thought I had done something, and I was like, man, no, I wanted to do more. So that's a big reason why I always wanted to come back, and why I jumped at the chance to come with Coach Rhodes, is because I felt like, well, there was more to be done 20 some years ago. So now it's time to get rolling on that and to make a lot of those things happen.
Yeah, that's definitely a good mindset to have, Joe. The fact that you wanted to come in and change it and make a huge difference, which as fans you definitely did. But I understand what you're saying, that you wanted to probably go to the Final Four or win a national championship. Um, and I remember when you beat North Carolina, you guys, and that was a good team. I think they were a 2 seed, and
Yep.
I mean, you had the number one pick in the NFL draft on that team.
Yep.
So,
He's a boss.
and Ronald Curry was on that team. He's one of the greatest high school players of all time. Played with Michael Vick, but
Yep.
that was a really good team. And I remember when I interviewed Tyler, I thought Dean Smith was still the coach of UNC at the time, but he wasn't. Missed him by I think a couple years. But
Yep.
what was your favorite moment at Penn State? I'm sure of all the moments you've had, college, NBA, high school, your favorite memory especially based off what you're saying, was at Penn State. What would you
Yeah,
say?
that run was a favorite. I think the story I always tell is just in preparation for that run. People often forget. I always tell our teams like there's no script, right? There's no like perfect script. There's no like this is the story for the season and here's step one and here's chapter one. It's like every season is its own adventure. And certainly that season was, right? We had some serious highs, serious lows, like the grind of the Big Ten. We weren't a super deep team. We lost some games we shouldn't have, maybe won a few we shouldn't have. And the big one was the win against Michigan State. My boys were actually, I got three boys, and my two youngest were asking me about that yesterday, actually. Um, just kind of how that all played out. And I was like, well, this team just won the national championship last year. They were a top five team all year, right? We're not supposed to have a chance to beat them. We probably need to beat them to get off the bubble or even just to make, have a chance. And we win that game. And I played out of my mind for the last 12 or 13 minutes of the game, literally, like it was a zone experience of just like a gift of how good I felt. And our other guys stepped up and hit big shots and just things worked out. Um, when you have those, the Sweet 16 was interesting because I wanted to go to the Final Four, right? So the way I'm wired, it's like we're in the tournament. Of course, we go to the Sweet 16, right? Like that's the way this works, right? You're supposed to do this. I did not appreciate. This is true. I tell people I did not appreciate the Sweet 16 run for what it actually was until probably 12 or 13, 14 years later when I retired from playing. So I was actually home in March. I was in the United States in March. I was never watching March Madness and following it with people watching March Madness. And I realized, like, oh, this is the second weekend. Everyone in the country is watching these games. This is a really big, like, to get to the second weekend is way harder than than I realized at the time. I was like, well, of course we win this weekend. Like, I don't care who these guys are, right? That was our mindset. That was the whole team's mindset is we just kind of looked, we didn't we didn't see ourselves the way other people did, put it that way. And clearly I never did. My brother never did. Titus Ivory's wired the same way. Jossie, Tyler, like we just looked, our guys coming off the bench, Sharice Shambus, Brandon Watkins, who's like a 5'11", 160-pound guard. Like he didn't see himself like that. And it's amazing when you get a group like that and you're playing North Carolina and they're trying to show how much swagger they got. And we're looking at them like, what are you talking about? Like, we're going to smoke you. Like, we got done the game and I was like, we should have beat them by 20, right? I didn't even shoot well enough. That's the way we thought. Um, but that run obviously was, the best memory. I think the biggest thing about it that I tell people is like when you win like that and you realize how much it rallies the community, right? That's what my vision always was. I articulate it now as a coach. I did it as a pro. It was like my vision was this is for others to be excited about, right? So I love hearing stories of like guys I'm working with now who are like, man, I almost got in trouble for riding on the streets in Beaver Canyon. It's like, yeah, that's fun. We love that. Where you come home and people are excited and pep rallies, and then more people are coming down to Georgia and they're like traveling for this thing. You're like, that's a taste. That's what we always wanted. And I think that's where the real joy is realizing like this is this brought excitement and enthusiasm to everyone, um, because it's not just about winning for us in this little cocoon. It's for the whole community.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I feel
awesome.
like that's really good for the Penn State community too, because everybody's so tight knit with
Yep.
athletics in general, including basketball. Obviously, up and down seasons in the past 10 years, but one thing I will say is the students usually always turned out in force for a lot of those ball games. Uh, Another question too. I don't know if we talked about it. What got you into basketball, like out of the gate, like your first experience with basketball ever as a kid?
Yeah, my dad was a high school coach. My grandfather was a junior college coach. My uncle, pretty soon after, when I was young, was another high school coach. Um, My dad, it was actually when I was young, my dad was actually coaching one of my uncles at his local high school, his former high school. My dad was a young high school coach. So like we loved basketball was number one in the Crispin house. My grandfather played at Temple in the 50s with the Final Four team. My dad was a really good player, played football at Villanova, but probably could have played basketball. Um, he and then so like basketball, we just love sports in our house. Like I just grew up loving sports, and then my brother and I come along, and my parents were young, so we were just playing. We were always playing. My dad was playing with us. We're playing in the kitchen. We're playing in the backyard. We're playing something, and then I would live at the high school gym. Right, my brother and I would come to practice, and we were ball boys from the moment we could walk. So we were really examples of just like organic. My dad would play in men's leagues. He'd play in, stuff like he was still hooping when we were young. So basketball was just in the blood, so to speak. It was just the air we breathed. And I took a quick liking to it, of course. I think it was just kind of inevitable, just being surrounded with it. But back then it was more organic. It wasn't like, I have all these leagues for kids that I started back in Jersey and all this other stuff. Back then it was like I didn't start playing any sort of organized ball until I was in third grade. Then it was like only semi-organized little in-house stuff. I didn't play in a league till I think I was in fifth grade. Didn't have any summer leagues. It was just you just played, man. You just go to the park and you play, and you go to another park and play with some old guys at the local gym. And I loved that growing up as a kid. A lot of kids lack that. It's disappeared today, frankly. And that's where I learned to love the game. It was just playing the game, and then naturally you go to camps and you start learning some things and refining some things and getting to work on your game. But for me, basketball was just it, and I love playing baseball. I played football, I played soccer, I did all this other stuff, but it always came back to basketball for us. And I knew that was like when you had the neighborhood kids, everyone kind of had their different sports they were better at, and I always wanted to excel at everything, but it was just common knowledge that like, well, I'm going to be better than all of you at basketball for sure. So, that's how John and I grew up.
That's awesome. And I think you make a good point too. A lot of that kind of organic community growth through athletics has kind of gone away a little bit, especially now, especially when you get into the higher levels with kind of what's going on with collegiate sports now as well. It's
Yep.
not even remotely close to being the same. Definitely some challenges there, some positives too. You can acknowledge as well, but definitely a different landscape. Mark, you want to jump in there?
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate the fact that you talked about the community so much because, like I mentioned at the beginning, I was part of that community, and you know, we had like Penn State has obviously a huge loyal fan base, largest living alumni in the world. So if the basketball team were to, and I think it's inevitable at this point with everything that Coach Rhodes is doing and you being there and all the great players they have coming in, it's unbelievable. Coach Rhodes is like Franklin when it comes to recruiting. I mean, he's getting a ton of good, highly ranked guys. So if you guys, when you guys make a run, that fan base is going to be there, and we're going to be watching for sure. So uh, I think in my opinion, it's inevitable at this point. But Joe, we could probably get into your NBA career. If there's nothing else you want to say about your Penn State career as a player. Um,
I think to your point, like with the community, this is true for a lot of schools, but I tell our recruits all the time when we do, presentations or we're talking to people, is like even though this is a big place and it's a big brand, it's still a small town. It still
yep.
operates like a small town. And there's a lot of places like that. I think sometimes though it's easy to lose sight of that and kind of forget that as you venture into the big thing. It doesn't matter how big it gets, it still is like that, right? I played overseas, and I think that's a good thing, right? I think the context for sports is community, right?
Yep.
Without community, like what is it? Right? That's what it is. That's You're forming community by playing with and against each other. You're building community by representing someone with the name across the chest. Like that's why we're here, right? It's why we exist. Um, But I think, having played overseas, that's the way it works, right? In our professional sports world, um, it's all big cities, more or less. It's city teams for big markets and TV markets and more fans to be able to get to games, etc. When you go overseas, you have smaller communities that have big teams, right? That develop big brands, and then compete against the big schools, right? The big city, whatever. Um, and the interesting thing about college athletics, even though we're becoming increasingly professionalized, is we're still small town community based, right? And so you could be a big thing in a small community, and I think it's easy to lose sight of that. But I think when you can connect coaches and players to that mission, it's just more enjoyable, right? And people know it, even if it's not a long stay, right? It's like it's okay, even if you can't have a 4-year stay, it's like overseas. If you only have a 1 or 2 year contract, that doesn't mean you can't connect with that community. You can. You just need to realize that's the reason why you're here.
Yeah, Joe, you played all over, include in the NBA. You played overseas like Tyler, um, and then you played for some teams in the states too uh, that weren't in the NBA. So, I mean, you had a long career, Joe. I mean, you started in 2001. You played all the way up until 2012. So you have a ton of experience past college, and you know we think of great basketball players at Penn State like Taylor Battles, and then on the women's side like the Kelly Mazzanis. When I was there, Maggie Lucas. You played a long time, and I always liked because I remember when you played in the NBA too, and uh, the fact that there was a Penn State guy that I mean your NBA highlights, Joe. I mean, you shot a three like it was nothing. You probably had your eyes closed. I mean, you were just draining them.
I tell people all the time the NBA was the easiest place I ever played offense. Um, and it's the truth. I mean, at the time there were like 2 or 3 teams, and that's where like I did miss the window a little bit because people always like you'd be great in the NBA now, and I'm like, yeah, but there's dudes now they're guarding the perimeter at 7'3". And back then, those same guys were sitting in the lane, and I'd come off a screen wide open, and I was like, "This is a joke. Like, I could do this all day." But very few coaches understood how to use that skill. That was my reality. So, Scott Skiles did, and then he left, and then I have the coach Frank Johnson who came in who didn't want to shoot as many threes, which was stupid. I mean, there's no getting around it. It was stupid. I was shooting like 42, 43% from three. But then to your point about traveling the world and just getting opportunities, I always tell people I wanted to play in the NBA for 12 years. I wanted to be Steve Nash, but shooting more threes, actually. That's how I wanted to play the game and change the game. Didn't get that chance, but I did get a chance to learn basketball in such a variety of settings that has led to me to have more stories and just more understanding of the game than I would have if I had just gotten what I wanted. Right. So I am really thankful for my experience and, traveling some different places, living in some different communities. I had 2 of my kids were born overseas, but learning how to play the game in a variety of settings, but also to represent diverse people. Right. You go from Spain to Italy to Poland to Greece to Turkey, right? Like there's cultural differences. There are all these different things, but then there's basketball. And you can connect with these communities through basketball, and that's what I learned how to do. And I look back and I often wonder what the heck was I should have kept playing because I didn't realize how hard it was to make money doing normal stuff.